Desert Bloom Retreat, Arizona, 6:45 a.m. The desert air was still cool when she arrived. A soft wind curled around the sand-colored stone columns of the entrance, lifting the hem of her slate-gray cotton dress. She paused a moment outside the glass doors of Desert Bloom Retreat, watching a hummingbird flit near a pot of blooming agave. Her name was Dr. Nia Sinclair. 45. No makeup, no jewelry, hair tied back in a tight, functional bun. A plain canvas tote bag hung over one shoulder, and a pair of black Allbirds on her feet had seen better days. Nothing about her screamed power. Nothing about her suggested CEO. And that, as it turned out, was a problem. Inside the lobby was marble, whispering jazz, and designer perfume. Executives in tailored suits milled about with smoothies in hand, rehearsing speeches for the Archeon Leadership Summit. A screen behind the front desk displayed the day's schedule. Panel 1, Rewriting the Future of Tech. When Nia stepped inside, the mood shifted, just slightly, like a ripple in still water. The receptionist at the front desk, a young woman with a tight bun and expensive white blazer, didn't look up at first. She was scrolling through her iPad, tapping furiously. But then she sensed the presence, looked up, paused. The smile that followed was shallow. "Hi there," she said with the kind of voice used for lost tourists. "Can I help you?" Nia smiled gently and handed her a printed confirmation email. "Yes, I'm checking in for the Archeon Summit. Dr. Nia Sinclair." The receptionist didn't look at the paper. She looked at Nia's shoes. "I'm sorry, are you catering?" Nia's smile didn't falter. "No, I'm a keynote speaker." A man in a charcoal suit walking past did a double take. He stared for a moment, eyes lingering too long, then smirked. "Thought this place had a dress code," he muttered, loud enough for Nia to hear. The receptionist cleared her throat. "I think there's been a mistake. This summit is invitation only." Nia pulled her phone from her bag. With 2 taps, she opened her calendar and showed the woman the official invite, complete with QR code and executive credentials. The receptionist's face stiffened. She tapped her iPad, slowly, then exhaled. "Okay, yes, I see you now." She adjusted her tone. "I'll have someone escort you to the lounge. If you wouldn't mind waiting off to the side, we'll prepare your packet." Her hand motioned toward a cluster of low chairs near the gift shop, far from the sleek couches where the other executives gathered. Nia nodded. She'd seen this before. From South Chicago to MIT, to founding one of the most quietly powerful AI security startups in North America, Nia Sinclair had never looked the part. Not when she was 12 and the science fair judges assumed she'd copied her project from a boy. Not when she was 25 and a white colleague at her first job asked if she was the new admin. Not even last year, when a venture capitalist complimented her pitch, she suggested that she bring on a real CEO to close funding. She had learned to expect the squint, the second glance, the thin layer of polite suspicion wrapped in, "Are you sure you're in the right room?" And every time she let them underestimate her. Let them lean into their assumptions. Because Nia knew something they didn't. Power doesn't announce itself, it walks in quietly and waits. As she sat near the window, sipping the complimentary lemon water, a group of tech bros passed behind her. She heard one say her name, not respectfully. "Sinclair? I thought she'd be taller, or at least not look like a school counselor." Laughter, a second voice chimed in. "I heard she coded her first AI from a public library in high school." Cute story. Let's see if she survives a real boardroom. Nia didn't turn around, she just smiled to herself. She remembered every face from 10 years ago when she pitched her startup Lumencore Technologies to Archeon Innovations. Back then, they'd ignored her. One exec even told her, "Our partners wouldn't take a risk on a female-led tech brand." Today, she was sitting in the same building where Archeon planned to announce its newest acquisition. They just didn't know yet that the company being acquired was theirs, and that the buyer was her. Tutvai. Dud elephant too? Backstory and outlook. Zangja Dr. Nia Sinclair, Dip Noichik Dip Sofen Hook. Fanay Dao So Hangchin Ganyan Vanoitam Gunu CEO Zaden, Du Qua Hu Bị Xem Thường, đến ngày cô trở thành người mua lại chính công ty từng loại bỏ mình, mà không ai hay biết. It wasn't the first time Dr. Nia Sinclair had been told she didn't belong. It just might be the last time someone said it to her face. She sat in the corner of the Desert Bloom lounge, back straight, legs crossed at the ankle, as if carved from quiet certainty. The lemon water in her hand had long gone warm, but she held it still, letting the condensation run down her fingers. Behind her, voices ebbed and flowed like tides, full of buzzwords, bravado, and booming confidence. Disruptive tech, strategic scaling, Q3 optimization. None of it mattered, because in less than 2 hours, everything they thought they knew about power in that room was going to change. Nia was born in Inglewood, South Side, Chicago, in the spring of 1980. She was the youngest of 3 and the only daughter. Her mother worked nights as a home health nurse. Her father, before the cancer, had been a preacher with hands made for fixing broken washing machines and broken souls. Books were Nia's escape. When the lights went out in their apartment due to unpaid bills, she read under the orange glow of the street lamp that leaked through the window. She didn't have a computer, but she had a brain that didn't quit. At 13, she won her first coding competition on a borrowed library PC. At 16, she built a basic facial recognition program from scratch. At 18, she earned a full ride to MIT with only 1 suitcase, 1 pair of shoes, and a plastic file folder full of scholarship letters. College wasn't welcoming. The boys in her dorm often assumed she was a med student or a social sciences major. One even asked her if she'd gotten in through a diversity program. She let it slide. Professors pronounced her name wrong. Nia rhymes with Mia, despite 4 years of corrections. She let that slide too, because her focus wasn't on being liked, it was on being undeniable. While others spent summers interning at flashy startups, Nia worked at a data lab on the graveyard shift, analyzing audio inputs for a defense contractor. At 23, she developed a groundbreaking adaptive security algorithm, one that would quietly influence home surveillance tech for decades. She should have been hired by Google or IBM on the spot. Instead, she was recruited by Archeon Innovations. They told her they were different. They weren't. In 2006, Archeon Innovations was still the scrappy underdog of the valley. Nia joined their team with hope in her chest and fire in her eyes. She was the only black woman on her floor. At first, that didn't bother her. She didn't need to fit in, she came to build. And build, she did. Within 2 years, she created a proprietary framework that doubled the efficiency of Archeon's AI surveillance recognition. Her name was on whiteboards, in pitch decks, in internal memos, but not in press releases. Her male counterparts were lauded in interviews. She wasn't even invited to product launches. The final straw came during a pitch to a Fortune 500 partner. Nia had spent 3 weeks preparing the tech stack, the projections, and the demo. But when the meeting started, her direct manager introduced her as our lead project assistant. She still remembers how they all nodded politely, like she was furniture. That night, she packed her desk into a cardboard box. No tears, no confrontation, just a silent walk out of a building she once thought would carry her name. Nia moved back to Chicago with 2 things: a USB drive full of unused prototypes and a $12,000 savings account. She rented a small studio above a bodega and started coding again. Just her, a secondhand MacBook, and a folding chair. For months, she lived off oatmeal and microwave lentils. No investors, no mentors. But every night, the city lights blinked through her blinds like Morse code, and she kept going. In 2011, Lumencore Technologies was born, her own AI security startup, focused on equity and access. Her vision wasn't just to sell software to high-rises and banks. She wanted her tech in schools, in daycares, in shelters, in places that couldn't afford to be overlooked. By 2016, her system was protecting over 200 institutions nationwide. By 2019, she'd signed contracts with 3 government agencies. And by 2021, during a quiet but brutal lawsuit scandal at Archeon, Nia Sinclair acquired a 46% stake in her former employer. They didn't notice. Until it was too late. Power looks like a man in a suit. That's what they still believe. Even here, at a summit meant to celebrate innovation and diversity, they didn't see her. They saw the canvas bag, the natural hair, the soft voice, the lack of designer logos. They didn't see the woman who, just last month, closed a $74 million federal defense contract, who personally funds scholarships for black girls in STEM across 12 states, who designed a facial recognition system that's being used to rescue trafficked children. And they certainly didn't see the woman who now owned a controlling interest in their company. She could have sent a proxy, could have bought a suite, brought assistants, walked in like royalty. But that's not who she was. She came for a reason, not to be praised, not to be recognized, but to watch, to listen, to let them speak freely while they still believed she was beneath them. And when the moment came, she would stand, she would speak, and they would remember every word they'd said behind her back. At 8:20 a.m., as she sat in the corner of the lounge, flipping through a small black notebook filled with notes and quotes, she felt someone staring. She glanced up. It was the receptionist from earlier, Caitlin Green, still stiff, still unsure how she had misjudged so badly. Their eyes met. Caitlin offered a tentative smile, unsure whether to be embarrassed, apologetic, or defensive. Nia nodded once, calm, regal, and returned to her notes. There was nothing more to say. Outside the glass doors, the desert sun had fully risen, turning the sky a blazing gold. Inside the summit hall, the final chairs were being filled, microphones tested, lanyards adjusted. Soon, the host would take the stage. Soon, the name Dr. Nia Sinclair would echo through the room. And soon, every person who had dismissed her, doubted her, mocked her, would realize they'd been speaking to the woman who now controlled the room, and by the time they stood to applaud, it would already be too late. The ballroom was engineered to impress. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted the soft blue of a desert morning. Giant LED screens framed the main stage, displaying the Archeon Innovations logo, clean, minimal, soulless. Tables were draped in linen so smooth they shimmered like still water. Waitstaff in black uniforms glided between aisles with trays of blood orange mimosas. The air buzzed with anticipation. This wasn't just any leadership summit. This was Archeon's return to dominance. After 2 years of public relations disasters, federal inquiries, and a revolving door of C-level executives, this was meant to be their rebirth. And no one knew who was behind it. Not yet. At precisely 9 a.m., a man in a navy three-piece suit stepped onto the stage. His name was Bradley Voss, Archeon's interim COO. Slick hair, whiter than white teeth, and the forced charm of a PR-crafted smile. He cleared his throat. Good morning, innovators, disruptors, and leaders of the future. Applause. I'm honored to welcome you all to the 12th Annual Archeon Leadership Summit here at the breathtaking Desert Bloom Retreat. Today, we talk transformation. We talk vision. And above all, he paused for effect. We introduce the new face of Archeon. The audience leaned forward. Bradley gestured toward the screen behind him. Now, before we bring out our keynote speaker, let's take a look at the future you're all here to witness. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered. Music swelled. A video began to play. Cutting-edge stock footage of city skylines, security cameras, drones, artificial intelligence interfaces, and happy, diverse families. All branded with Archeon's cold, sleek style. Then came the words, "A new era begins today, under new leadership." From the creator of Lumencore Technologies. The room stirred. Introducing Dr. Nia Sinclair, Chairwoman and CEO, Archeon Innovations. For a second, just a second, the room was dead silent. Then came the murmur. People shifted. Whispers cut through the room like blades, eyebrows raised, heads tilted. Caitlin Green, the receptionist, sat near the back with a frozen mimosa halfway to her lips. Bradley Voss blinked twice, stumbled over his words, then forced a grin. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our new CEO. The room turned toward the stage entrance, and from the side door, without an entourage, without fanfare, Nia walked in. Every eye was on her. She wasn't wearing a tailored suit or heels, just a charcoal gray dress with rolled sleeves and her same old canvas bag tucked under one arm. But there was something in the way she walked. Unbothered, untouchable, unapologetic. As she stepped onto the stage, some faces registered confusion, others embarrassment, and a few, those who remembered her from years ago, registered something like fear. Bradley tried to offer a handshake. She bypassed him. Instead, she went straight to the podium, adjusted the mic, and looked out across the sea of faces. There was no PowerPoint, no flash, only truth. She began quietly, calmly. "Thank you, Mr. Voss, and thank you all for being here this morning." Pause. 12 years ago, I stood in a different room, pitching a security framework to the executive board of this very company. I was told the market wasn't ready for my ideas. That leadership had optics to consider. I was asked to sit outside while the real decision-makers finished the meeting. Eyes shifted. Faces flushed. Some of you were there. Some of you made those calls. Others just sat silently. And that's okay, because silence taught me more than applause ever could. There was a stillness now, a kind of tension that only truth can create. You see, I didn't come back here to get revenge. I came back because change doesn't happen from the outside looking in. It happens when we take the wheel. She clicked a small remote. The screen behind her changed. Archeon Innovations, effective immediately. A division of Lumencore Technologies. Gasps, audible. Yes, that's real. This company, the one that wouldn't hire me as a lead engineer, is now a wholly owned division of the very startup you dismissed. You didn't see me coming because you never looked at me to begin with. Then came the announcements. Several high-ranking executives, including 2 board members involved in the discrimination scandal, were to be terminated immediately. A racial equity audit would be conducted across all divisions publicly. A new initiative, Core Access, would provide free AI security systems to 1,000 public schools and clinics in underserved communities by year's end. A mandatory ethics and bias training program, developed by a team led by Black, Indigenous, and LGBTQ+ engineers, would be implemented company-wide. If that makes you uncomfortable, Nia said, locking eyes with a red-faced man in the front row, imagine how uncomfortable it is to be ignored for a decade. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then stronger. Louder. A few stood up, not many, but enough. Backstage, Bradley Voss was pacing phone in hand trying to contact someone, anyone. He hadn't been told. No one had warned him. His voice shook. She can't do this, can she? But no one answered. The line went dead. His role too would be evaluated. Caitlin Green sat in stunned silence. Her memory flashed to that morning, the way she'd spoken to Nia, the assumptions she'd made, the smirk, the microaggressions. Now the woman she tried to dismiss had just become the most powerful person in the room. And for once, Caitlin had no words. Nia closed her speech with this. You don't have to respect me today. But you will respect what I build. Because I didn't build it to prove a point. I built it so no one after me would have to. She looked directly at the founders of a VC firm that once called her too emotionally driven for a leadership role. This room has spent decades defining what a CEO is supposed to look like. Maybe it's time the definition changed. The lights came back on, and the silence in the room was finally broken by the sound of real applause. The moment the applause ended, the aftershocks began. Within hours of Dr. Nia Sinclair's keynote, clips of her speech had gone viral. One shaky phone recording caught the exact moment she said, "You didn't see me coming because you never looked at me to begin with." That single sentence was reposted more than 3 million times in 24 hours. But beyond the headlines and hashtags, something deeper had begun. A shift. Not just at Archeon Innovations, but across the entire landscape of leadership, tech, and power. Behind closed doors, Archeon's former executives scrambled to respond. Several board members were escorted out of the building before the summit ended. Shareholders called emergency meetings. PR agencies launched into crisis mode. Some tried to paint Nia's leadership as too radical, too fast, too personal, but none of it stuck. Because the truth was harder to spin than expected. Nia had the documents, the numbers, the contracts, the control. She didn't just have a majority stake, she had the moral high ground, and for once in Silicon Valley, that was starting to mean something. The culture at Archeon began to change immediately. The Monday after the summit, staff returned to their desks with notices in their inboxes. A confidential employee equity survey was now live. New protocols for harassment reporting had been implemented, anonymous, third-party, zero tolerance. Executives would undergo monthly bias and ethics training, led not by PR consultants, but by professionals from underrepresented communities who had lived the experiences they were teaching. Departments previously led by homogeneous teams were restructured. Promotions were paused, not canceled, but reevaluated. Nia didn't come in swinging a hammer, she came in with a scalpel. Precise, purposeful. Cutting rot at the root, not just trimming the leaves. True to her word, Nia launched Core Access within 6 weeks of the summit. It was the largest AI infrastructure donation in U.S. education history. 1,000 underfunded schools, 500 women's shelters, 200 rural hospitals, 100 juvenile centers. All now had access to smart, secure technology, designed to protect, not profit. The initiative trained local youth to maintain the systems, creating jobs in communities where tech had always felt like a distant promise. And it wasn't just hardware. Lumen Core opened 6 regional learning labs offering free weekend courses in coding, cybersecurity, and machine learning. Each one is named after a different Black woman in tech history. The first? The Gladys West Center, Detroit, Michigan. Of course, the media had a field day. The story had everything: a brilliant Black woman rising from the ashes, a corporate betrayal reversed, a public reckoning. But Nia refused most interviews. She released one statement: "This isn't a comeback story. I never left. I was building where they couldn't see." And that was all. She let the work speak louder than the headlines. Some of the people who had once dismissed her came crawling back. A former colleague who once claimed she lacked executive polish emailed her with congratulations and a lunch invite. She declined. One investor who turned her down a decade ago asked to join Lumen Core's next funding round. She told him the round was already closed. It wasn't. But not all returns were bitter. Rena Paul, a junior developer from Nia's old Archeon team, once been passed over for every promotion, was now heading the Ethics and Inclusion Division. Her first order of business? Writing a new code of conduct named the Sinclair Standard. But the power came at a cost. Nia's days blurred between meetings, reforms, and rebuilding. She slept little, ate less, and the isolation grew. She couldn't walk into a room without being watched now, not with awe, but expectation. Bang. She was no longer underestimated, she was mythologized, and that came with its own kind of prison. There were nights she sat alone in her home office, barefoot, staring at old photos from MIT. Back then, the weight hadn't yet arrived. But neither had the victory, and she reminded herself, this wasn't about her. It never had been. One evening, weeks after the summit, she opened her old notebook, the one she carried with her to every speech, every city, every boardroom. She turned to the back page and wrote, "Dear Nia, age 12. They'll laugh when you raise your hand. They'll question your ideas. They'll ask if you're lost when you show up. And years later, they'll pretend they always believed in you. Don't let any of it change you. The quiet power you carry, that's the revolution. Keep walking into rooms and keep making them yours." She closed the notebook and exhaled. 6 months after the summit, Archeon's stock had stabilized, employee satisfaction reached a record high, and Lumen Core's Core Access initiative was shortlisted for a Human Rights Innovation Award. But beyond the numbers, a new generation of Black girls, queer coders, immigrant scientists, and overlooked visionaries now had someone to point to and say, "She made room for us." On a warm spring morning in Chicago, Dr. Nia Sinclair stood in the parking lot of her old middle school. In her hand was a set of blueprints. She wasn't there for a reunion. She was there to break ground on the Nia Sinclair Institute for Future Technologies, a tuition-free STEM academy for underserved youth, built on the same block where she once read books by streetlight. As the construction crew began unloading equipment, a little girl approached her. Brown skin, hair in braids, curious eyes. "Are you somebody famous?" Nia knelt down, smiled, and said, "No, I'm just somebody who refused to stay invisible."